Okay.
So the unit we're doing today is equality and diversity, and the learning outcome we're going to do today is learning outcome 2, which is to understand the importance of promoting equality and valuing diversity in lifelong learning. Now, in the last session, we looked at learning outcome 1, which was to understand the key features of culture, which promotes equality and values diversity. Now, what can you remember from the last session in regards to what we did?
God, that was a long time ago. So
It was, yes.
2 weeks ago.
We looked at the Equality Act. Do you remember?
Yeah, and protected characteristics.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the protected characteristics?
Disability.
Yes.
Race. Age.
Yeah.
Gender.
Yeah.
Something about marriage. Was there something about marriage?
Marriage and civil partnership, yeah.
Marriage and civil partnerships. How many?
Pregnancy.
Pregnancy, yes.
So we looked at why the Equality Act was introduced, and there was a need for that act to be introduced because there was forms of discrimination that was occurring within the workplace, not just within the workplace though, within like an educational establishment, within housing, within the healthcare profession. So there was a need for the act to be introduced, so there's a legal framework for protecting rights and opportunities of individuals. We also looked at the different types of discrimination. So we had direct discrimination, and that was treating those differently with the protected characteristics. We then will have indirect discrimination, and that's like looking at someone from a different perspective, but having rules and disadvantaging someone. Harassment, victimization, and we also looked at each one in regards to what that would entail in regards to, you know, within the workplace. We went on to look at the meaning of equality and diversity and what that meant for you as an individual as well, because, you know, everyone has a different definition of what equality is. You know, it could be, for one person, it could be treating everyone equally. For another person, it could be that their beliefs are treated equally, or, you know, that we should, you know, be equal to everyone. I mean, we have the rule of law, okay? And that is the main thing that were introduced through Greek philosopher Aristotle, based around Eudice's principle of the rule of law, saying that, you know, one of the 3 propositions was that we treat everyone equally. Now, is that always the case, though?
No.
No, we said that both together.
Yeah, it's not always the case, and sometimes, you know, we actually kind of breach the law in discriminating against people, and, you know, looking at things like, you know, their disability, their age. And I have seen through working within like my profession, I have seen that if I was when I was 21 and doing my degree, I would have got a job straight away in the profession that I want. I did get the job I wanted, but I'm just saying, if I was 21 now and someone was 45 or 50, it would be more likely that I'd get the job first because of the age. And it does happen. Women are discriminated against on the gender basis because that's a big thing. That's always been a big thing. We also looked at the importance of promoting equality and diversity within a classroom. Why do you think it's so important to look at promoting that within a classroom? And for individual learners, why do you think it's so important? If we promote good practice within an organization or within schools or with individuals, what are we treating people? How are we treating them?
Well, we should be, you know, treating them equally and obviously
fairly.
Fairly, you know, we should be equality is about fairness, you know, and it's quite a broad area because it covers a lot of things, equality and diversity. You know, we also went on to look at the legislation, the Equality Act, the Race Relations Act, We looked at the Children's Act in regard to Every Child Matters, and that's really important, even not just in schools, but when you're at court. When I used to be in practice, I used to represent clients in court, family court, and we'd have the element of the courts, that the reasoning that the family courts was separate because it's obviously a delicate situation and it involves children, and the judges always wanted to protect the child, and what their main concept was to do everything and make a decision which will be in the best interest of a child. You know, they always want to look at what the child has to say. So, you know, courts do take into account, you know, from a certain age, if the child's mentality is enough for them to identify where they want to live. So if they want to live with one parent, the courts do take that into account. You know, and if the child is able to talk about things, then, you know, the courts will speak to the child about, you know, where they want to stay. But, you know, the courts will take the best interest of the child, and that's what happens within the Children's Act as well. We looked at that. We also looked at the best child, the element of why that is so important in education as well. You know, when we look at the child matters, you know, what are we looking at when it comes to equality and diversity?
So I think it's, again, what Adrian was saying, it's about treating all our students fairly.
Yeah.
So they feel, you know, safe. In, you know, we can promote, you know, the Every Child Matters agenda, which is obviously being healthy, staying safe.
Yeah.
Something about promoting economic well-being. So unless that's kind of in place,
do you think
it's all, I think it's just it's all part of it, I think, but I'm not explaining it very well.
Yeah, no, it overlaps, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everything overlaps with each other. Do you think, though, by bringing things into the curriculum, and I mean, there must be, people have different perceptions. I have different perceptions, and I've talked to mothers, they'd rather homeschool than send their kids to school because of the curriculum. So do you think that plays a big part in diversity and equality as well? You know, the government set a curriculum, yeah? And some parents disagree with what is being taught to their child, okay? And there's some elements of that, for example, I would disagree as well. Because I know that sometimes, you know, we don't have the best of governments, sorry, in the UK, and I will say that because we've never elected anyone. For the last 3 prime ministers we've had, they've not been elected. So, you know, there are discrepancies within the government setting this curriculum for parents to follow. But I was watching a documentary, and 49% of people, and more towards the south side, are homeschooling their children. It's quite a high percentage. Do you think that's based around the values and diversity and the culture as well?
I mean, I suppose it is, and I think, I mean, you know, certainly you have, I would imagine, you know, our education system is effectively based on a, how would I term it? I suppose like a sort of a Christian basis, really. You know, I mean, and I would imagine if you are not a Christian person, or you don't, you know, agree with, I mean, I suppose most people would agree with Christian values, but you know what I mean. You know what you may.
Yeah, I understand, but diversity it's not just about your religious side of it, is it? Really, it's more about, you know, bringing in things into the curriculum that parents, you know, don't believe their children should be following. You know, and the big thing at the moment is the sex education. You know, that having to teach things like that within school, where parents are saying our children should be children till you know they grow up. Why should we start to teach it predominantly? The documentary I was watching, the predominantly Christian families that are doing that towards Kent and that side, and 49% are saying I'd rather homeschool than send my child and teach them things at the age of 5.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, of course, it's a unfortunately, it's a you know, a kind of it's a one size fits all education system, really, and I think as though you can take as many reasonable steps as you want to, you know, make it as inclusive. You're always going to get somebody who's not happy. And I mean, I just look, you know, when I grew up in South Africa in the 90s, and we had like an RE teacher, or RS teacher, sorry, as you would say in this country, but I mean, he was like a practicing minister, and like I look at it, and he, you know, he was very derogatory towards any other religion other than his own. And then I look at my son, who's year 10, and he does RS, and it's so diverse, and it's looking at it more from a anthropological point of view rather than a, you know, these are what people believe, you know, you're not kind of buying into it, you know. So anyway.
I understand what you're coming from. It's interesting, isn't it, how the teaching styles and everything change over time, and how we were taught and how in my time and things like that. It's totally different. What do you think of that? What do you think, Patricia?
Yeah, I think that's true. Like, I think there's always going to be, you know, like I think Adrian said about, you know, parents not being happy with what's taught at school for what reason. So I'm actually teaching sort of relationships and sexual education, RSE to my class, and there's always like, they always send like the parents out like an audit beforehand, just to kind of get their views, and obviously then we've got to kind of make allowances for that somehow within our teaching. So, you know, if they don't want their kids to learn about a certain aspect of it, like consent or, you know, things like that, then we will have to obviously make provision, you know, to respect the parents' values and beliefs, and then obviously make alternative arrangements for them when it comes to teaching that particular part of it. So,
and it is trying to, you know, trying to keep everyone happy, you know, and promote.
Which isn't always easy.
That's never going to be easy within the profession. No, it's difficult. So today we're going to look at the learning outcome 2, which is the equality and value in diversity in lifelong learning. When we look at diversity, and it says here to promote risk of harm. So how can you use equality and diversity to promote the learner from risk? So, you know, you follow policies, like you said, procedures. You try to make everyone happy, but it's not always the same, is it? It's not always the case where, you know, one parent will be happy, or the staff member, you know, may be happy, or the student may be happy. You've got to make them feel safe. Safety is the big thing. Be heard, and obviously try to make them feel valued as well, because that's really important when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and ensure that every student is obviously learning something. It's really interesting, like you said, Adrian, that your son learns different things from, you know, different cultures, and historically that wouldn't have been taught, would it, really? Whereas, you know, when I was at school, a lot of the stuff that's being taught now was never taught.
For example, I don't remember ever learning about like RSE or religion, and learning about kind of the things that are really kind of relevant nowadays for our children, like LGBTQ plus and non-binary and all those sort of things. So that's that's coming on like quite a few years now, but we never learned anything.
We never know. No, I didn't as well, and I feel like it made me the person who I am now, but then it's interesting to learn the stuff, because you need to, within, you know, within any sort of establishment or business or education, you have to make sure that you're diverse anyway. You've got to promote diversity and also look at, you know, including everyone, even if it's, you know, anyone from that has different perception of, you know, their sexuality or anything like that. So you've got to try to keep everyone involved and be more inclusive. So equality and diversity, so staff and learners will know what steps to follow in the event of any sort of concerns and everything. Policies and procedures include things like, you know, the Prevent Education Act 2015. And that was quite an important act that's been introduced, and there was need for that act to be introduced, and it was to look at individuals mainly from higher education institutions, and it was to do with terrorism, and there was a need for that to be implemented. And the reasoning behind it was because there was issues around how people were being swayed into doing things that, you know, they don't have, you know, they don't have the beliefs, but, you know, it's a difficult one. I think Prevent is quite a good one that was introduced in regards to having any sort of individuals being drawn to any sort of issues of terrorism. Human Rights Act, again, 1998, is really important in regards to, you know, having to you knowing that you have some legal protection. The Human Rights Act 1998 was adopted in 2000 October, and the reasoning behind this was everything from the European Convention on Human Rights is incorporated into this act. So this act is used in the UK. So each country has its own act. But the European Convention on Human Rights was introduced in the 1950s. And at the moment, there's 47 countries that have signatory to that act, to that convention, sorry. And the Human Rights Act, a lot of MPs and prime ministers didn't like the Human Rights Act. Why do you think they didn't like it? Why do you think there's a lot of controversy to say that we're going to change it? Why do you?
Because they it covered a lot of workers' rights, and they couldn't exploit us as much as they'd like to.
Yeah. So under that, you have, you know, the right to be protected for the right to a fair trial. You have the right of life, you know, you have your right, and individuals don't know you have your right, your basic rights, which is you have your private and family life. What do you think private and family life include? What do you think your private and family life would include? If you
my children, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
You know,
would it include whatever you want to do in your house? You can do whatever you want. It's your private life.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, and that is something. If you look at human rights cases, and if we go back to asylum, that was one of the things that Theresa May was saying, that she wants to abolish the right to a fair trial, the right to be treated fairly whilst you're in detention. You know, which because that's not always, you know, the case. If we go on to miscarriages of justice, the biggest one at the moment is the post office, the Bateman post office scandal, and that's a huge miscarriage of justice that occurred through some fault of some software, but people were prosecuted for that. And that was nearly 25 years ago, but still, till this day, nobody's been paid any form of compensation. So it's quite a big scandal where there were miscarriages of justice, and that happens quite a lot. I mean, I have worked in the profession for 12 years in practice, then 17 years on teaching, and I've seen things that I wouldn't have expected within an organisation that's a professional organisation, and how they treat people. And I've seen it all, so I kind of go back all the time to things like that. But the protection from the Human Rights Act is to protect us as individuals. And people don't know we've got these human rights. And people, you know, you have the right to be, you know, your liberty and security. So if you're in a cell, a police officer is not allowed to beat you up. That's your right to liberty, your security and liberty. Then we've got the Equality and Diversity Act, and that protects people from any sort of discrimination in the workplace, be it like constructive dismissal, any sort of discrimination against age, your disability, that's quite a huge one as well. Your religion, these are quite big legislation that is introduced, but it protects an individual. Do you think these legislations that we have in place, do you think that, I know obviously the reason they were introduced was there was a need for them, but do you think they offer quite a lot of protection for individuals?
I think they offer
to a certain extent, to a certain extent. So it's never going to be fully,
no,
because obviously society is changing all the time.
So some of the laws that are the old laws no longer apply because the wording of the law doesn't really apply to societal changes. So as society is changing, laws, we have in the UK, which is a good thing, we have an unwritten constitution. And that means not like America. America has a written constitution. We have an unwritten constitution. With that, we have the right to change laws when we need to change them without waiting years and years and centuries. Whereas in America, because they have a written constitution, it's very difficult to change the laws quite quick. It could take centuries. And the big thing in America is the gun crime. You know, in certain states, you know, there's been incidents where, you know, they've gone into schools and killed all the children and the teachers and things like that in certain states because there's bigger states in America. But because they've got a written constitution, it's very, very difficult. So we have a little bit of flexibility where we can, you know, issues of, you know, prevent was introduced within the education system because there was issues of terrorism, you know, at that time. There was a need for it. So we brought that in. Laws are being brought in regards to, you know, discrimination against age. And we have, you know, you could bring that in because we have that flexibility. So we're quite lucky like that. But there's also disadvantages of having an unwritten constitution, you know, so you know, it's two-way thing really. It balances it out, but also it sometimes is a disadvantage as well. So 2.1, reflect on how promotion of equality and diversity can protect learners. Within a learning environment, learners may have inappropriate views, may make racist, sexist, or other offensive comments to other students. If this is not immediately addressed, it's likely to reoccur and result in bullying. You know, and sometimes it's not. Do you think it's the environment they're in that they become like that?
I think partly because obviously, you know, students spend, you know, quite a lot of time, you know, in the learning environment in the class. But I think it also, it depends on, I suppose, how kind of they're brought up with, you know, the values and, you know, what's going on as well within the home environment, because there could obviously be racism or sexism. So then they then may, depending on, you know, their parents, obviously, because a lot of things do lead back to the home environment. They could then obviously bring some of those views into school.
Values and beliefs are what is instilled into them from their parents. So, you know, you could also do it as a teacher. You know, you could instill the good values into a child, but when they go home, like you said, it may be that, you know, it's okay to treat a female like this. It's also okay to, you know, not recognized, you know, inclusivity is also okay. The parents may teach them to, you know, may not make them aware of things like, you know, respect people, but also equality is a big part of having a safe place, because like it said, you know, if young people don't understand any equality and human rights issue, then it does, you know, get into bullying, you know, and a child may be bullied on the basis of that. So for, you know, a school to teach diversity and, you know, instill it into the children and promote it and teach these topics, and make students get involved in activities that, you know, will promote any sort of safe environment for a child and equality and diversity. So, you know, it's really important that, you know, in today's society, that we promote and instill these positive and open-minded attitudes into children. It's difficult, it's not easy.
So I think that's an example of that, is we had like a whole, like we do kind of drop down days within our school. So Mental Health Day, Black History Month Day, which I'm not sure if obviously Adrian does within his school, but we also we did like an anti-bullying day. So 3 different ways kind of explore that. So I think that's a good example of how
it's a very good example, that we at the college where I work as well, we do like an International Women's Day.
Okay.
And we also, because I'm involved a lot in a committee which deals with FGM.
Yep, I think you said that before.
Yeah, and I try to promote that in the college quite a lot, because I've had male staff, but not just staff members, but students that asked me a question on whether FGM was an additive to a food, because they didn't know.
No. But again, unless they're taught, then they're not maybe necessarily going to know.
And for you, you know, to teach it, and which is a great thing, you know, to teach that and, you know, make them understand, it improves relationships as well. It doesn't just, you know, get them thinking, and, you know, because when I'm teaching family law, we talk about divorce, and we talk about marriage certificates. I have students in my class that are of different cultures. Okay, so I have a mixture of students, and it's always really nice for the students who don't understand what a nikah is, which is an Islamic marriage, and not being recognized in this country. And they always ask me, and it's really good for me to, you know, tell them what it means, because it identifies that they want to learn, you know, they want to be challenged, and they want to try and understand the diverse, you know, society. And it's really interesting that they really want to go into it, and, you know, they may not agree with some things, but then for you to instill that into them quite young, and have quite an opposite, positive and open-minded attitude towards things, the student will find that quite, you know, rewarding as well. I don't know how they do it in your school, Adrian. Do you promote it?
Yeah, they do. I mean, you know, they do have you know, things like the mental health week, and you know, they do things like Black History Month, and yeah, and I mean, you know, there's always an anti-bullying campaign. There's a lot of sort of community, you know, kind of base and awareness.
Do you think that impacts on the child, or do you think it has?
I mean, I you know, it's very difficult, because I mean,
difficult,
I you know, the school I'm at is I mean, it's an all boys school, and it's majority, you know, white kids, and you know, and I think a lot of them come from quite a sort of privileged background, and I think, you know, they do try and instill it as much as they can, but, you know, is it going far enough? You know, it's like, and I mean, I just wonder if sometimes we run the risk of tokenism, you know, Whereas, you know, I think doing something is better than doing nothing. But
yeah,
you know, I just sometimes wonder, like, you know, when I look at, you know, I mean, obviously I'm in like a design technology department, so you know, we try to do things like, you know, give some awareness of, you know, non-European white male designers. And it is quite a challenge, actually. It is quite a challenge, you know.
It is.
Yeah.
But then, you know, to promote these kind of things is challenging anyway, isn't it? Especially
it is,
when you know that, you know, you may not work with predominantly so many diverse cultures. It's hard to, you know,
it is,
try to implement it into your practice. So
I mean,
sorry,
carry on. No,
it's okay. Fine. No, it's all right, Adrian.
No, I was going to say that I do think, you know, it is quite remarkable how things have moved on. You know, certainly I think, you know, and since all of us we're kids to now, I think obviously, you know, things can get, you know, there's still prejudice and a lot of nasty stuff does happen, but I do think, you know, society is certainly changing, you know, kicking and screaming, but
slowly.
Anyway.
I believe that slowly, Patricia, slowly changing, and people's perceptions of things are slowly changing. But you know, it's a good thing. How is promotion of equality and diversity implemented in your setting? And you talked about your own experiences at your schools and stuff, and how you promote that through, you know, having these mental health days, you know, Black
History.
Black History Day, and it's good that you do that, because, you know, it shows that you are embracing equality and diversity within your settings. So reflect on how promotion of equality and diversity can protect learners from risk of harm. So we have policies in place. Some examples are getting everyone involved in cultural celebrations, value the differences of staff and learners, prayer rooms as well. Sometimes, you know, in certain institutions you need to have prayer rooms for the different cultures, correspondence in different languages, and that's quite a big thing. That happens within any organisation, translators and the dress code as well. And these are some examples in promoting equality and diversity. Protecting learners from risk of harm. So is it important to sustain a safe and inclusive learning environment? Health and safety policies is really important. When we look at what control measures do you have in your setting, can anyone give me an example of what kind of control measures you have in your setting?
So obviously COVID, we had, like, everything was just changed, you know. There was a lot of different things that they had to do. So, you know, when they came in, their temperature was taken. We encouraged, obviously, social distancing, like washing of hands. So that's one that I can think of. Sort of more recently.
Do you think that still happens in some institutions, though? Even now?
Maybe,
I think they still try to implement it in certain institutions, because, you know, they still try to implement the issue of, you know, washing your hands and things like that, and it does, you know, it's still in certain educational establishments, it's still an ongoing thing. And the reason behind it is just to try and prevent any sort of issues or anything happening again. So examples of control issues: one-way system on stairs to prevent any sort of accident, locked gates and main and internal hallway doors, access to authorised personnel only, so you've got fobs or access cards, first aiders, first aid kit and accidental report book, which must be in every educational establishment, cleaning equipment locked away, accessible learning environments, and risk assessment, especially if you're working with children from different backgrounds, but also with children with a disability. Okay, so you know, you need to protect them. because, you know, sometimes, you know, it's beyond your control, what happens, any sort of risk or anything. So everything needs to be documented. And here we've looked at AC 2.1, which you can cross-reference to Learning Outcome 4, AC 4.2 and AC 4.3. Also include an example of a time you manage a risk, such as a class trip. You know, risks is a big thing that needs to be identified within like any establishment, and the risk assessment books are there to establish that form of risk. 2.2, explain actions that can be taken to value individual learners. It's really important as a teacher that you treat all the learners with any sort of respect as well. And, you know, identify, you know, that, you know, you listen to their views and take into account their opinions, because especially learners, they feel, you know, they feel privileged if you take that into account, that you, and I see that, you know, if I listen to a learner whilst I'm teaching them and I've taken on board what they've said, they actually feel, they actually feel like they've kind of accomplished something, but feel valued, which is really important. Also, you know, it says learn the names of each student and pronounce it correctly. Sometimes it's difficult from different backgrounds. You know, it is not easy to sometimes pronounce the names. And I will give you an example. When we have graduation, my manager has to come up to me at the start of the graduation, and if it's quite hard names, it was we had it in December, and he struggled with the name, and when he got up there to call them up, I could tell he was really struggling with some of the names, but he tried to practice them before, to try to call them up and things. So it is, you know, sometimes it's difficult to pronounce certain names as well. But making the student feel valued, and, you know, making sure that you listen to them, and listen, you know, and also pay attention to the student. Be approachable so that you can tell you if something is wrong and if you need help, and have intervention. So one-to-one sessions like tutorials, listening to the student, and guide the student as well. It says, and that's a student that is heard and feels valued would flourish in learning environment. I mean, I'm sure you have one-to-one sessions with students. Do you think they have an impact on their learning, or do you think, have you seen students change through having these tutorial sessions or one-to-one sessions? How do you think it has a good impact on students?
I think it does, because I think it's so obviously my students have SEN, so I think it's just going back to I'm just going back to obviously that every child matters is one of the key things of that was, you know, being healthy and staying safe. And if the children don't feel that like they can talk to you, then I think that's quite a big problem. So our school's quite I think good in promoting the fact that, you know, if there's a problem and, you know, they need to talk, they can do that at kind of any time of the day. And then our school counsellor now has introduced where she, you know, she'll, you know, happily see any of the students kind of at lunchtime. So if they don't feel that they want to talk to a member of staff, then that's kind of an outside agency. So that kind of gives them another option.
Agency,
But we always promote in our school culture that, you know, if there is something, and some of them are, you know, some of them are better than others. And I think, again, it's going back to knowing your students. So like straight away, if someone, you know, one of mine comes in, like I work with the sixth formers, you kind of know by like their facial expressions or something, or some of them will be more vocal and say, or if they're quiet, I'll say, should we go next door and, you know, have a chat? Do you want to talk about something? So we're doing it constantly.
I think it's really good that you do that, because I think, you know, making them feel part of, you know, society, and making them feel that they've got the same rights and, you know, obligations as anyone out there is really important, you know, and you know, making them feel it's difficult sometimes when students don't feel, they feel neglected. But when you have these sessions with students, it really helps them. It makes them feel valued as an individual. Because at the end of the day, you know, you're treating them fairly, you know, and you need to bear that in mind, that when you're talking to students, you know, there are some students that are a little bit more reluctant than others. Like you said, you know, a bit more reserved.
Mm-hmm.
It may take time to come, but, you know, you can, you know, help them, and you can, you know, try to build a relationship that, you know, they can be quite trustworthy and come to you then. A tip here is you should refer to the equality diversity policy at your setting. So use an example of a time you supported a learner, identified a learning need gap and addressed the issue. For example, setting up one-to-one sessions to explain a student what they were struggling with. Have you had any students that have come up to you in regards to, I mean, you don't have, due to confidentiality, you don't have to tell me the student's name, but has there been an incident where you've kind of made the student understand an issue that they've been having and try to address it?
Do you mean like an issue within like the classroom, or
anything
something
that they've had,
something that learning, or
maybe
else?
learning, or even if they've had issues at home or anything that they've come and seen you about?
I'm sure there is, but I just can't think.
Yeah.
Likewise. Have you, do you
No.
know of any time you've had to kind of, you know, feel like you've had these one-to-one sessions and you feel like there's something that the student was struggling with and you were able to support that student?
I mean, I've given, you know, kind of practical support in the classroom, but, you know, and, you know, certainly with kids that are perhaps a little bit weaker and things like that. But, you know, and I think I'm quite lucky because, you know, I'm support staff, so I can have a slightly more casual relationship. They don't. A lot of the kids don't see me as like an authority figure. And I think sometimes that can be quite revealing. You know, they're a bit more relaxed around me.
And sometimes that's a good thing when students feel that they're more relaxed. They will kind of, you know, say what they want to say, or if they've got anything on their mind, you know, they will, you know, say that. Sometimes when you do have a session, one-to-one session, it's not always a good thing, because I've seen my students don't open up all the time into one-to-one sessions. So, you know, it's sometimes a struggle.
Absolutely.
And students do have in their mind a person they want to talk to, who they prefer to talk to. And I've had that through experience, you know, where I've had a student that prefers to talk to my colleague more than me. But that's how they feel comfortable. So we need to respect what they want, to be honest. And even as long as they get what the issues they have through to, you know, anyone, it's quite a good thing. 2.3, explain good practice in providing individual learners with information. So how can you provide learners with information? You need to know what their learning needs are. No two learners are the same. Every learner has a different skill and ability and lifestyle. Initial and diagnostic assessments will help you identify your learner's knowledge and identify any gaps. And it's really important that you do that. Not every student, like we said, is the same. A number of assessments can take part in identifying their strengths and weaknesses and areas of improvement. The one that has come up here is the KWL charts. Are they good for children, you know, students? And they are there to obviously primarily help students better digest and understand a lesson. It kind of looks at the activating the students' prior knowledge. So gets them excited by asking them what they want to know about the topic, and helps them reflect back. And I think reflection is really good. And it's not just, you know, the students reflecting on themselves. I think teachers, sometimes it's good for teachers to reflect back on things as well. I do a lot of self-reflection, and I think it's really good. because, you know, it makes you see yourself from a different perspective. And, you know, like we do self-marking as well, you know, and peer assessments, which, you know, is good for the students to be able to, you know, say what they felt like that the other student needed to develop on. And you can compare this. I mean, I don't know how you both feel about self-marking and peer marking. Do you do any of that?
We do a little bit within my school. So if they do like a quiz or a test, we'll get them to swap their answers around, and then they'll mark each other. So that's one way we do it within.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I do a little bit of that as well, and I think it works well. Especially with like the quieter students, and if it's a new set of students, for them to kind of engage with each other.
Yeah, I think it goes quite well.
Yeah, and give each other feedback, or you know, maybe look at managing their own learning. Different ideas do help, you know, in groups, and it helps them, you know, identify what they're good at. It helps them identify, you know, their areas of improvement. So good practice also involves speaking to the learners about their expectations, identifying and highlighting what they need to work on. For example, if there's any sort of homework, essays, PowerPoints, and what their expectations are. Do you think personally that some students more than others have more expectation than, you know, others? Do you think some have more?
I think within my setting, yes, because we had a learner, as I said, who left last summer.
Yeah.
And his parents still were kind of telling him that he was able to be a doctor, even though that will never sadly be the case. So I think, it's about, I think sometimes the parents' expectations, and I don't think it's not that they don't understand, and I think it's what they want, you know, they would like in an ideal world, but it's not always realistic. And it's how it's about managing those expectations.
Yeah. I think it's quite difficult in that situation, don't you think, Patricia, in trying to to reiterate to parents, not in a bad way, that, you know, the child is not that he's not capable, but, you know, he needs more support.
Yeah.
Because again, some parents don't want to hear that, do they? No, and what do you think of that, Adrian? Do you think it's a struggle sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, every child is an individual, and you know, they all got strengths and weaknesses. I think, I don't know. I think it's possibly because you know, their relationship to technology is so vastly different to ours, and I think they so I think they sort of expect everything to be quite immediate. And then I don't know. I mean, I find there's a definite loss in sort of kind of motor skills. You certainly see it in, you know, in like year 7 and stuff. You'll see kids come in who can barely use a pair of scissors. You know, and things like that, or pencil. And I think I mean, I always find it interesting, because I always find that like, although these kids have, you know, a world of knowledge at their fingertips, it always makes me like, blows me away how like they still expect you to kind of give them the answers. They just won't go look for it.
No.
You know,
they always want to be spoon-fed, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sort of loss of initiative.
Yeah. And I think as generations go by, I think it becomes more and more difficult, because the expectation is that, you know, the teacher's job is to give us the answers.
Not teach them how to and equip them with the skills to be able to do it for themselves.
And not for us to do. It's like it's not just you know, in high schools or primary schools. It's in even, you know, further education establishments like where I'm teaching. Some of the students have this expectation that I'm going to sit there and give them the answer. And they're on degree level students. So yeah, these are, you know, their expectations are something that, you know, the whole point of doing a degree is that you have your own, you know, research, you know, you learn yourself through the experience. And not to, you know, and I always have this ideology with students that what I teach you through the PowerPoints is a skeleton. You need to go out there and read. And, you know, we try to cater for them, try to do block teaching, maybe 2-3 days rather than the full 5 days on a full-time course. Try to cater for them, try to identify what areas they should do in exams. So we do a lot, which we need to kind of sometimes hold back a little bit. And like you said, Adrian, it's sometimes quite difficult because their expectations are that. And I think it's not just the expectations of the students. I think sometimes in some cases, it's the expectation of the parents as well. That you as a teacher should be doing this and should be doing it like this and should be doing it like that.
Yeah, we've got a few of those in our school. So
have you?
Yeah, no, it was just I don't work with him directly, but he's one of the students that would be due to come up to sixth form in September, so this year. And his parents were like, oh no, you know, this isn't going to be the right place, blah blah blah. And then well, there was a few like that, you know, that it's not going to meet his needs, etc. etc. And then they've kind of gone off then, done some research, and then found out that as in comparison to some of the colleges that would be on offer, is way up there. So now they've completely done a 360, and now that they're like, yeah, we want him to stay, and because obviously within my school they get all the kind of additional therapies like occupational therapy, speech therapy. So we've all got that built within their, you know, their daily curriculum, whereas a college wouldn't be able to offer that. So they've obviously thinking, you know, they know best, you know, but not always in terms of obviously what we provide as a post-16, you know, option for them. So yeah, they've done a whole 180 turn, and now they're both wanting them to stay. So yeah, parents' expectations are very high.
Sometimes you're banging your head against a brick wall, aren't you? Trying to get through to them, what their expectations are, what their child's needs are, you know, because it's a total different, you know, learning program. You know, you need to, you know, be able to produce a learning program that suits, like we said, the individual's learning needs. But the parents may say their expectation is that the child must learn like this. So it is sometimes quite a strenuous and quite a hard job to do. You know, to kind of get them to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So AC 2.3 can be cross-referenced with Unit 1, which is Learning Outcome 2, AC 2.1 and 2.3. Explain what practices you use personally and how you encourage students to reach their potential and how you address areas of development with students. How do you pass on information to learners? So do you go through verbal feedback? How do you do it in your practice, Adrian?
Yeah, verbal feedback, you know, also, you know, written as well, emails. Yeah.
Do you think it helps them?
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. What about yourself, Patricia? In yours, do you do self-assessment?
So we do the verbal and kind of written feedback, but obviously because of our learners and their needs, I don't think sometimes it may kind of be accepted in the same word. Is that the right word? As obviously Adrian's, because Adrian's students obviously are mainstream students. But we always, you know, we just do it throughout the day, like even if you know they're in the playground or you know doing a sport. So we just, I think, continuously giving them that feedback which hopefully then I think obviously has hopefully a positive effect.
Yeah.
So
sometimes you do stuff and it's done every time you see a student, and you don't document it, or you don't, you know, it's happening all the time, and a lot
it's
of
just
the
part
stuff
of your day-to-day like practice, isn't it?
Yeah. And sometimes, like you said, you don't document things. You go on and it happens each day, and it's a normal thing to do. To be able to, you know, assess them or give them feedback on things, you know, and give them the encouragement to do better. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to document everything. Plenary today, so we looked at how to promote equality and diversity, so how this can protect learners from the risk of harm. And that's things like bullying and stuff, you know, if you don't promote it, some, you know, students might get bullied or harassed on the basis of cultural or diversity. What actions can be taken to value individual learners? So more reflecting on them, working with them, valuing their needs as well, and understanding what they're trying to say to you, because some learners learn differently than others. And also, you know, if you show that you're able to, you know, value what they are saying and, you know, motivate them and engage them, they're going to feel like they're wanted, and they're also learning through that experience. They learn as well. Good practices in providing individual learners with information, so feedback. We talked a little bit about peer marking as well as self-assessment, and how you do one-to-one sessions with them, and how they, you know, enhance the students' learning through, you know, taking responsibility to manage their own learning as well sometimes. And looking at, you know, good peer assessments. Setting goals as well is really good for students. You know, if you have a student that you think may struggle, setting a goal for students. Do you tend to, both you and Adrian, do you tend to, Patricia, set goals for students to see how they would, you know, if, you know, the students are fully understanding, and, you know, if there's kind of a checklist for them?
So one of the ways we do that is obviously all my students have an education healthcare plan. So they've all basically got targets that they work on. So we kind of do it. So we're doing it all the time. So it's either occupational therapy targets, just general targets. So we're always kind of building that in to kind of incorporate that into what we're teaching them.
Yeah. You know, it's really important. And I think more for you, Patricia, in your job, to reward and encourage them as well. Do you think that works, you know, praising them, encouraging them, and rewarding them?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Otherwise they'd just be, you know, walking around and,
you
know, they wouldn't say anything or do anything. And, you know, about, you know, providing them with that, you know, those different opportunities which they might not get elsewhere. So, for example, in the half term, me and my colleague, one of the students, so he's just turned 16. He's always, since I've known him in my first class, so that's like nearly 4 years ago, he's always wanted to be a postman. So my colleague Lynn, who's also careers lead, she had a contact that there was a Royal Mail event in London. So on the Tuesday of the half term, she was like, do you want to take him up to this event? So it's, I think, about kind of sometimes going that extra mile for the students, because I don't think his parents would have been able to take him for obviously whatever reason. So it's kind of going the extra mile, and he loved it, because they do like a postal worker apprenticeship. So that's then something we can look more into it for him, and they do offer some degree of work experience. So then that's obviously going to open hopefully some doors for him, which is obviously what we're doing. You know, we want the best for our, you know, our students. So hopefully, you know, he might get some work experience.
Yeah, and look, that's good practice. You went over and above. You helped them, support them, and you know, there's not. And I will say, there's some really good teachers out there, and there's some really bad teachers. There's good and bad in everything. But you know, when you praise a student and you know, encourage them and you know, value them and treat them, you know, fairly, they you know, they feel valued rather than discouraged by anyone. Because you could say to them, and it's small things like, you know, this piece of work that you've done is really good, or it's excellent, or you know, you know, you've worked really hard, and that is encouragement for certain students, that rewarding and encouraging them, you know, to achieve more and achieve better, you know. And I feel listening to student also, you know, in the college I work for, I'm always listening to students' ideas, but also encouraging them to, you know, talk about their feelings, but also encouraging, you know, them to talk to other students and improve, you know, be more consistent, and also encouraging them to, you know, do things different ways, and it helps them. It really does. And I feel they have a sense of accomplishment when they've done something, and I think they feel really positive about themselves as well. And especially when I've got like mature students that have come back to education quite late in life, for them, it's an encouragement if they've done something really well. So some of the references we've used in today's session: so promotion of equality and diversity to protect learners, and you can just click on that to go to the links. And we've finished learning outcome 2 now. Has anyone got any questions? Adrian?
No, I'm fine actually.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Patricia, have you got any questions?
I think so far so good.
Yeah.
But obviously I'm just looking at the like assignment sheet in front of me, and
Yeah.
obviously I think you mentioned within your
me share
PowerPoint about cross-referring to like Unit 1. Obviously,
Yeah.
I haven't done Unit 1 yet, so
okay. Is it learning outcome 1? Let me just have a look at the assignment stuff.
So the assignment sheet is so 1.2 is saying about cross-referring to Unit 1 learning objective 4, which obviously I haven't done. I think Adrian's probably, have you done that, Adrian? And then 2.1.
I have done it, but I can't remember.
So 2.1, it says cross-refer to Unit 1 task 4.
So
obviously I haven't, I'm not yet there, but it's fine because I'm sure it'll all tie in eventually. I hope.
Yeah, it will. Yeah. And you know, the support is there for you to help you as well. So don't worry about that. When it comes to your assignment, you obviously need to do Unit 1 to refer. Is that learning outcome 2?
So there's one on learning. There's one on learning objective 1. So it's saying about cross-referring to 1.2. And then learning objective 2 also refers to cross-referencing to Unit 1. But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. So when it comes to doing the assignment, the learner needs to look at cross-referencing, but also let me just open this up for you, just 1 minute, so at least we've got stop sharing that, and I want to just see if I can get you to that. But have you got the same thing there, haven't you?
Oh no, I haven't got that one. I've got the
oh, you haven't?
It's in no, I have got that, but it's my one's in, I've got like the front page, so when we get the feedback from like our tutors, it's
you've got this one, haven't you? Let me just show you.
It's like a grid. I think I sent it to you.
Is it this one?
I can't see it yet.
Oh, okay.
It's in like a table.
Yeah, it's the front cover sheet.
Yeah.
Don't worry about this yet.
Evidence.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking
Don't
at.
worry about this yet until we get on to like the assignment discussion, and then we can have more of a discussion about this. And then I'll know properly in regards to the assignment that I've sent them. So don't worry about that too much, okay?
When are you hoping that will be kind of agreed?
Probably the next couple of weeks or something. I don't know.
So you'll obviously share that with us once.
Yes, yeah. That'll be, everything is on Moodle. Additional resources for you to go on to are on Moodle, and you know you will get any sort of additional sources that you need to help you with the assignment. So don't worry about that.
That sounds good.
Any other questions?
Right.
No, I'm all good.
Excellent. Thank you for attending today's session. And it was lovely seeing you after a couple of weeks, and I will see you next Wednesday.
Okay, right. See you both next week.
See you later. Bye, Adrian.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.